it for you. Okay. Sharing. I'll send it to your WhatsApp. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, we're going to get started. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight on a beautiful sunny day. Welcome back to LocalFocus's 5th Community Planning Matters Speaker Series. My name is Jackson, if we haven't met, and I'll be the MC tonight. A little bit about me is that I'm a graduate student at the Department of Geography at the University of British Columbia, specializing in urban and economic geography. My master's thesis is on the housing board, specifically focused on transit-oriented development, the Broadway Plan, like some of you already probably know. And I'm also part of the Vancouver Tenants Union, part of the BC chapter specifically, but I work alongside other comrades to educate renters on the rights and fight for tenants against eviction. So before we start, I do want to say that this event is being filmed, so to make it accessible for folks after, so you can rewatch it if you'd like. If you don't want to be pictured, please sit closer to the back, and we'll try our very best not to film you. If you're new here, LocalFocus is a nonprofit, nonpartisan society, and our mission is to deliver a 12-week public speaker series on neighborhood-based community planning, enriching civic dialogue ahead of the Vancouver's 2026 municipal election. Vancouver's legacy of neighborhood-led planning, emphasizing livability, collaboration, social cohesion, and context-sensitive design, has been overshadowed by citywide growth strategies prioritizing scale and profit over local needs, often through the targeting of already existing affordable housing stock. We see that a lot in the Broadway Plan. This series will attempt to foster collaboration and recenter public understanding of neighborhood planning's important role in addressing key challenges, crucially supporting and preserving housing affordability without compromising livability, balancing growth with infrastructure and services and social capacity, and calling for tenant rights, protections of our homes, and enhancing local democratic participation. By sparking informed and inclusive conversations, we aim to empower residents to talk to their neighbors, to stand to landlords, institutions, city officials, and developers who compromise our livelihood and propel displacement. In fighting for a more equitable, resilient neighborhood, so that we can honor Vancouver's historical planning strengths and we can work together to build a stronger urban future. Tonight, we're joined by Brian Palmquist. And Brian is a Vancouver-based architect, urban designer, building envelope and building code consultant, and a lead accredited professional, the first green building system, with a career spanning more than 5 decades. He currently consults on building and planning matters to a BC municipality with 5,000 residents. That work and his engagement in Vancouver's planning and design efforts affords him a relevant perspective on planning, design, and development challenges throughout BC. He was the managing architect for the Concord Pacific Official Development Plan, or P, and the first 2 phases of the Cold Harbor ODP. He personally designed more than 1,000 social housing and club housing units in several BC communities and consulted on many thousands more, as well as affordable market housing. At a smaller scale, he proposed the laneway housing concept. He was the first one to do so in Vancouver in 2008, and currently monitors the evolution of multiplexes in various parts of BC. He is the author of the Amazon bestseller. 5 years of Brian's recent writing can be seen at his blog, City Conversations, at brianpalmquist.substack.com. Highly recommend you check it out. Before Brian starts his talk, I just want to remind folks, as neighborhood planning is about community dialogue, we welcome and encourage respectful participation. After Brian's talk, we'll have a Q&A session. Given that we have limited time together, we ask that for this Q&A, to please keep the questions and reflections streamlined and appropriate, simply out of the fairness to others that need to speak. Each participant will be given like around a minute. I won't be timing, but just so we're once again respectful of each other's time to ask their question. And then that can allow Brian to actually be able to provide an answer for you. And tonight, the mic is not mobile, so we ask folks to come up 5 at a time. Sorry for like kind of the more regimental, it's just so that folks can be comfortable sitting down, and when they want to come speak, they can. Once again, be careful of the stairs and the cord, but we'll kind of share the mic tonight. So you can ask your question, Brian will do so. So we'll share the mic tonight. Might be doing a little dance up here. And to be considerate of Brian's time and the venue booking, if we are coming up close to the end, I may have to cut off folks even if they're lined up. So apologies for that, and I thank you for understanding. My hope is not to do that, but just wanted to give you a heads up. It's not personal. And if you enjoyed this event tonight, and if you want to help in spreading the word of the importance of community planning, please share this series with friends and family, or if you want to support LocalFocus, please check out our donation function on our website at localfocus.network. This is a completely volunteer-driven event, and it would not be possible without our residents like you and our guest speakers. So without further ado, please give it up for Brian Palmquist.
I kind of like this pulpit. I don't want to get too used to it. So the Vancouver Official Development Plan, what I call Vancouver's Official Destruction Plan, was enacted on March 31st, erasing all city neighborhoods. That elimination of all of Vancouver's neighborhoods does not mean my remarks about the city where we live don't apply to Dunbar. It simply means they apply to all of Vancouver's former 22 neighborhoods. Fair dues when City Council has canceled all of us. Slide 2. There we go.
Is that the right one?
Say that. Perfect. Vancouver has a long history of densification that we are often accused of refusing. The part I participated in, and many of you have lived through, started some 50 years ago. I need to briefly review some of that history because it affects most of Vancouver and offers some clues about how to include by outlining a 3-part approach to making things better. In the mid-70s, next slide, when I arrived in Vancouver to a rental market with a 0.5% rental vacancy rate, the NDP government of the day was addressing housing affordability in the form of HCBC, the Housing Corporation of BC. HCBC was a provincial crown corporation run like a private development company. In fact, it was a private development company bought by the government. Its management was told to run it like a private company, except it would build on free or cheap provincial crown land, trading profitability, profits for affordability. In collaboration with municipal and federal governments, this model quickly built thousands of affordable rental, co-op, and strata homes. That model will still work today. Next slide. Fast forward to 1986, when Vancouver City Council approved our recommendations addressing monster houses. Not monsters because they were unaffordable, but because they were unneighborly. The home on the left of this image was deemed monstrous in 1986. My employer, Rick Hulbert, was retained by the city to study the issues and appointed me as project architect. Monster houses had all but eliminated any rear yards in favor of garages attached to the main home, resulting in loss of green space, increased shadowing, and overlook of neighboring properties. Basically, the loss of the quiet enjoyment of one's home. We started our research with a technique that's all but forgotten today. We talked with the citizens affected. City staff under former Director of Planning, Dr. Ann McAfee, had noted many of the complaints about monster houses. We knocked on those folks' door and asked about their concerns. We looked at their issues, observed the backyards that were now shaded, the fruit vines dying for lack of sunlight, the overlooking carports that had become rowdy party decks. The number of complainants was large, but we actually discovered that there were only a few common areas of contention. Mandating a rear yard between the main house and a garage on the lane, which was our main recommendation, resolved most of the issues reported by neighbors. Have a look at the red dotted area, doesn't look very red, on the slide taken from the 1922 zoning bylaw. It was still in effect then. There was more to our work, including some massaging of the permitted height and density on the property. perhaps anticipating as we now know that planning solutions could actually exacerbate the problems. Next slide. Dr. McAfee contracted a couple of home designers to make up, oh my God, iterations until we landed on proposed massing that resolved Monterey House issues of the day. City Council passed the zoning refinements, and the Monterey Home issue receded. Public consultation and experimentation produced an enduring solution. That solution would also still work today. In the fashion of why not leave well enough alone, this color photo captures our evolution. On the left and right are old timers built in the 30s and 40s. The beige home was built under the RS zoning in place until 2022 with periodic tweaking. Notice it's not much taller than the old timer on the right. The home under construction is not a multiplex. It's actually a single family home. That's what you can do today. I'll be writing a city conversation about that in the near future. Inadvertently, this simple expedient of mandating a decent sized yard between a home and its garage or shed also preserved the future option of additional density through smaller dwellings at the back. Some 20 years before they were actually proposed. The mandatory rear yard, as well as nuanced building height, roof slope, etc., have been lost in recent multiplex changes. The folks wanting the quiet enjoyment of their homes are still there, albeit a bit older. They're just being ignored. Next slide. Fast forward another generation to the first Vancouver Eco-Density Forum in 2008. The Eco-Density Initiative was officially launched in 2006 as a response to urban sprawl. The initiative proposed using density, design, and land use as catalysts for livability, affordability, and sustainability. In those days, the city staff and politicians still held meetings where they all listened to the public. Remember those? I was ready the evening of the first evening Eco-Density Forum when comments were invited from the audience, ready with a site plan of my own property, showing a single-family, one-bedroom laneway home, including an off-street parking space, comfortably accommodated in the improved garage massing of a standard 33-foot wide lot. 70% of lots in Vancouver are 33 feet. My proposal wasn't rocket science, but it caught the fancy of the audience. The politicians in attendance noted that and instructed planning staff to get behind the initiative. There were many ideas put forward that evening, but the Vancouver audience seemed to be ready for laneway homes 10 to 20 years before they were adopted in many other North American cities. So Vancouver citizens were ready to densify a generation ago. During the utility fees and lengthy approval periods attached to those laneways by city staff. There are about 400 laneway homes built each year in Vancouver. These would accommodate more than 10% of the city's historic annual population growth. Imagine if they weren't so difficult to build. Possible. Why are laneway homes so popular despite the high cost of their approvals and servicing? I believe it's because they are a simple idea that clearly represents gentle densification, which has many meanings, but I take to mean building forms that accommodate population increases that are fairly easily absorbed into existing neighborhoods with acceptable impacts on infrastructure and community amenities such as schools and parks. In the almost 40 years since setting the stage for laneway homes, the development landscape of Vancouver has changed dramatically. Vancouver is not unique in suffering from lack of affordability, loss of open space and tree canopy, aging of schools, community and healthcare facilities. If you want confirmation, read the headlines and story précises from the New York Times, the Sydney Morning Herald, or the Manchester Guardian. They're interchangeable with the Vancouver Sun in their dismal descriptions of housing affordability issues. Everywhere there is hopelessness leavened with anger. For me, this anger crested with the October 2022 election, at which an extremely pro-development regime was elected to a 4-year mandate. Sadly, their performance has its roots in 2010, when Vision Vancouver was elected to run the city. So in short order, the real estate department changed from a place where land was held and leased to create affordable housing into a place where land was sold at the highest price consistent with their poor management, squandering the city's endowment to fund a rapidly expanding bureaucracy and unnecessarily enriched private developers. Neighborly building forms and laneways are jettisoned in favor of the massive multiplexes and high-rises we see today. The planning department abandoned neighborhood-based planning in favor of today's top-down decision-making, and elected politicians and their staff gradually eliminated opportunities for the public, who are their electors, to be heard. In the face of 4 years of disastrous development, which have not addressed the issues of affordability, community amenities, and unequal opportunity, I nonetheless try to embrace the positive. I believe we need positive recommendations going forward, applicable generally rather than to special interest groups. In the course of writing more than 200 city conversations to date, I've identified just 3 underlying themes that between them capture an urban design philosophy that I believe works. Embrace in urban design is a concept with a long history around the world. It tells us to work with our past history of the places we've been bequeathed, and that only when we do this can we move in directions that work for all. It tells us not to discard past plans such as the 70 that were recently tossed out, especially those developed with significant citizen input. Next slide. Embrace is also a scientific concept in urban design. There's ample peer-reviewed research that above 6 to 8 stories, tallest building in that picture in Falls Creek is 9 stories. But above that, residents lose connection to their streets, their neighborhoods, etc. There's also ample peer-reviewed, and by the peer-reviewed I mean scientifically done, not just, I think this is a good idea. There's ample peer-reviewed research describing the many social problems that arise in high-rise housing. Embrace tells us to hold close our history in science-based massing while understanding and accommodating the impatience of those for whom our history is not by itself working, including our younger citizens. We must embrace the future with our youth. Next slide. Embracing the future revolves around making conscious decisions about beneficial futures for all. Those decisions require that we first determine our actual population and realistic growth projections, then the resulting housing needs, rather than accepting aspirational bureaucratic targets based on little of any research as shown on the left side of this confusing diagram. At the same time, we must determine how many homes of what sizes are actually completed or under construction to better match housing supply to need. And we need to add in our unbuilt capacity, by which I mean what might be built at defensible, humane, low and mid-rise densities. Those measures will give us our go-forward data. In summary, we must embrace the past, the present, and the future wherever we are considering urban design solutions for our communities. This leads to my second prescription for community development, which I call enhance. Next slide, please. We have to relearn how to improve our cities and towns bit by bit so that we can get back to processes that worked so well a generation or two ago. The planning and urban design lessons of the 60s and 70s seem to have been forgotten by today's planners and designers, or perhaps they were never taught. Dr. Penny Gersten and Dr. David Lay reinforced these concerns in their recent LocalFocus talks. Enhancement was foundational to generations of urban designers for each major planning breakthrough, such as Falls Creek South and Granville Avenue in Vancouver. There were literally hundreds of local scale opportunities with each new building. And we used to walk around the neighborhood when there was an application and try and figure out what worked, as opposed to just saying, we'll just do that. Next slide. We need to return, again. Next slide, everywhere. We need to return to an approach where new development at scale provides public amenities, in most cases, not just cash. At historic provision levels, the currently planned and proposed large-scale developments would require new city parks equal to 10 times the size of the Langara golf course. That may be excessive, but at the moment, proposed developments include almost no publicly accessible space. Enhancement also requires community consultation and fine-grained analysis by qualified planners. One of the foundational views of the visionary planner, Jay Jacobs, is that local people know best what is appropriate for their neighborhood. If we concentrate on the study of our existing neighborhoods and the identification of each development proposal as an opportunity for improvement rather than destruction, we're ready for the third element of successful planning, which is evolve. Next slide. We have no issues with increasing density along with population. Cities must evolve. Say many folks at the neighborhood meetings I attend. In the run-up to the 2022 civic election, Councillor Colleen Hardwick invited me to participate in Zoom meetings because we had COVID going on, with representatives of about half of Vancouver's neighborhoods. At every one, we asked the question, can your neighborhood accommodate X hundred new homes per year? Where X is an estimate of needed annual growth based on an existing neighborhood size and unbuilt capacity, and assumed growth will be shared equitably across the entire city, consistent with actual population projections. When proposed as a more modest neighborhood-based number rather than the city needs 83,000 new homes, which was city staff's comment in 2023, the response by each neighborhood to a logical neighborhood-based target was always positive and supportive. Sad to note in passing that the recently approved Vancouver official destruction plan has eliminated the city's 22 existing neighborhoods as bases for public consultation and planning. To summarize my remarks, here are at least 5 things government at every level can do. 1, find out the true dimensions of housing need, including housing tenure types and community capacity. 2, match those needs to more cost-effective housing types, typically lower mid-rise. 3, review and remodel regulations to create true efficiencies and reduce costs. 4, make municipal, provincial, and federal lands available on a long-term lease basis to retain value for citizens and truly reduce land costs. And 5, efficiently and quickly as possible. I mentioned that in home, I get a lot of friends go, yeah. In conclusion, the successful evolution of communities requires that their existing natures and plausible features be embraced and the neighborhoods be enhanced as a natural byproduct of development. When considering how to vote in this year's election, I ask you to ask this of candidates. Next slide. How will you and your party embrace and enhance our city so that it can evolve to a place where new residents are welcomed and accommodated and existing residents in their neighborhoods are celebrated rather than discarded? Next. So, I'm going to go through all this quickly. Next one. Thank you for listening and for being part of our city.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brian. That was awesome. We'll be starting our Q&A now. If you're keen to ask a question, I just want to remind folks keeping it streamlined so it's fair for people with, just so we can have as many questions as possible to really have a generative conversation tonight. And yeah, if you want to come up forwards, totally can. I'll meet you here, and yeah, you'll just be sharing the mic. So you can come on over if you have a question. Yeah, just come right up, and then we can share the mic all together, like one big happy family.
And I'll leave you with this one.
Perfect, thanks.
So Cambridge, Massachusetts has developed affordable housing overlay. And that does not throw seniors out of an older purpose-built rental building. Can you hear me? Do you want me to repeat it? So Cambridge, Massachusetts has developed affordable housing overlay, which does not rip seniors out of older purpose-built rental buildings. So it's a gentle overlay, and they fast-track development. I can give you the link and everything, it's in my thesis. So is that an idea maybe that the city could use?
The short answer is yes. The slightly longer answer is that I'm aware of the Cambridge approach, and it's worked there. I think that some variation on that theme could work here. We're a much bigger place, it could be a little more complicated. But we really need to have a council that puts effort into thinking about what methods will work in the city rather than just saying, we're going to do this. So yes, it can be done here.
Okay. Right, since you have written about the official construction plan, I'd like to pick your brain on how quickly the pace that will happen. Does it depend on whether the real estate industry successfully begs for money laundering to be made great again, or does it depend on the provincial government introducing another wealth tax that's compounded annually to, speed up the constructive confiscation? Thank you.
Well, I think that the speed of construction has very little to do with what we're currently experiencing. And you just have to look around at how few buildings have actually been completed and how many buildings are being paused. I think the activity that we are seeing that's very vigorous is the activity of stockpiling land, flipping land, trying to make money without actually doing anything to address any of the issues of the community. I think fundamentally that's what we gotta stop. And we do that, then things like the speed of construction will be fine, and we won't have to worry about whether any level of government is trying to fiddle with new taxes or old taxes to try to boost development along. I think fundamentally the issue is that we're artificially inflating the value of land. We're letting it be flipped. We're not doing anything to require people to build. It could be as simple, if you had to get from the dog park, no offense to dogs, to construction in say 2 years, then a whole bunch of stuff would either get done or sold. If you had to not sit on your development permit for years, and in fact had to move forward or sell a property, then things would happen. Right now, we're going nowhere, and it's getting more and more expensive to go nowhere.
Generally speaking, right now, there seems to be in all our levels of government. Can you hear me?
Get closer to the microphone.
Closer to the mic. Yeah, okay. Generally speaking, there seems to be a movement through the different levels of government. I'll do that. Yeah, correct. There seems to be a general movement in the different levels of government to be less and less transparent in their undertakings. And one of the major concerns that I have about what's happening in the city of Vancouver is that the data isn't clear and the data isn't transparent. And a lot of the projects and the planning and the policies are based on population projections put out by the city of Vancouver. And currently they're saying that by 2050, the population is going to increase to 250,000 people. Whereas Stats Canada has put out figures that say that the population will increase to 150,000. And a lot of the policies put forward proposals by the current planning department are based on the 250,000. Thus, we have much more of a rush towards demanding a built environment that responds to 250,000 instead of 150,000. So my first question is, and I'll try to speed it up here. My first question is, how do you deal with that difference in the population projections? And the second part was, currently we have some builders who have bought land, have gotten development permits based on the latest policies like the Broadway plan, the Vancouver plan, and they're sitting on the land due to economic considerations, according to them, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any possibility of putting a time limit on development permits such that Little Mountain catastrophes don't happen repeatedly with projects that are lying fallow right now? Thanks.
Thank you. Two excellent questions. In terms of population discrepancies, the city of Vancouver, I don't know, marketing office, mayor's office, communications office, put out a bullet recently where they celebrated all of the housing that's been, I'm not sure what. They use the term created, approved, constructed interchangeably. And I think what we need is we need to have real data. We need to be telling the appropriate folks in the city. We want to know which units and where are occupied and are under construction, are under development permit, etc. Now that's all stuff you can do. You just have to choose to do it. And right now they're choosing not to do that. And that data may or may not exist, but it's not transparently available to the public. In terms of time limit, that already exists. I think you have 2 years from the time of issuance of development permit until you're supposed to get a building permit or start construction. I'm not sure which is, I can't remember. But the current council, every time somebody comes along and says, please, we have some more. We just roll over and they give you an extension. So there are many projects that have had 2, 3, 4 extensions of their permits, and they still haven't done anything. So all you have to do is enforce the rules you got.
Good evening. My name is Dunbar, and I mostly have just a gut feeling from what's happening over how complex the city is, from the water to the sewage, to the electricals, and the communities. In the past, we had churches and some remnant here. And it's unfortunate that, because the word synagogue means meeting house. There's no Hebrew equivalent, it's Greek. And the churches are disappearing. It's unfortunate because it's a good meeting place, I think, like here. And I wish they were more like 20 years old. And in 2 minutes, I can only tell you that from gut feeling, say when I call the city, once I spoke with not a developer, but a planner. And he says, well, look, the architects put their seal on it, the engineers put their seal on it, I put my seal on it. And basically, it's a waffle hold. And we signed to it from the beginning. Expo, Olympics, they said, we want a big city, you want to be like the Americans? Well, let's not be like other people. Let's think before you give power, so much power to these people. Who are these people? I mean, it's like, how come we cannot talk about housing? And it's, I guess we prefer to speak of, the mayor right now is pushing something. I think he prefers to talk about this in baseball that he's sponsoring. So that's, it's typical thing politicians. And just like Ross Perot in the United States years ago would say, well, politicians, when it's obvious to the brain dead, they come up with all these explanations. Well, we wanted to be part of the G7, the G20, or whatever you call it. It's the corporation. We gave our power to be ruled by corporations. And I want that because we have people in corporations that are intelligent and everybody's receptive. 30 seconds, yes. And so it's not a speech I want to do. I just want to, I'm sorry?
What's their question?
There's no question. The thing is, there's no question. It's just a question. How would you bring more people interested in speaking about the land? You know, the Native American, they can claim something. But do we claim something, or do we even care? This is my question. Do we really care?
You didn't formally ask a question, but I will respond to your general remarks. I understand and appreciate and agree with much of what you're saying. We have a political system. It's got lots of flaws, but it's what we got. So we've got to work with it. And we do have a lot of honorable people who are we're engaged in that. And it's a pretty thankless task. So we've got to give them some benefit of the doubt. Interestingly, I'm doing a presentation at the end of the month for the Planning Institute BC on the mundane topic of how to read architectural plans for junior flammers. And I only say that because you had said the architects stamp it and the engineers stamp it, so why should we stamp it? And the purpose of my presentation is to explain to these planners that on the one hand, these are knowledgeable professionals. On the other hand, your job isn't just to rubber stamp, it's to actually think about how the things that you're being asked to approve bear on the city that you or the municipality or whatever that you are a part of. So, and as to the baseball thing, my wife tells me that the Vancouver Canadians play in the best baseball stadium in the world.
I just wanted to ask about the notion of mid-rise, which seems to have crept up to higher and higher rise over the years. We've got a history of three-story buildings in Vancouver, which fit in nicely with the tree coverage and tree heights. I noticed in the presentation you talked about research showing that beyond 8 stories, people get disconnected from the street. But it seems that it's at 5 or 6 stories where they start to overpower trees and change the constitution and the feel of the neighborhood a great deal.
Well, there's obviously been a lot of research in that area, and generally lower is going to be from a neighborhood point of view better. But the psychological research, if you will, that's been done on the subject basically says it's somewhere between, depending on my eyesight, you know, I can't see the street from 5 feet, but anyway, but typically on average, when you begin to get up to 6 or 7 or 8 stories, the typical good person with good eyesight can't any longer discern the facial features of the person on the street, even if they look up directly at them. So there's other similar research, but that's one of the key items. Another one is that mature street trees in many cities will create a canopy that goes up to 6 or 7 stories. You've got to get a chance to grow. But when they do that, again, when you're in the canopy, you are part of the neighborhood, part of the street. As soon as you get above the canopy, then you're looking at the horizon and the sky, just all nice stuff, but it's not the neighborhood. So there's a lot of research. It kind of coalesces in that 6 to 8 story range. The sure ain't 20. And, you know, low-rise buildings, I mean, when you plant street trees in Vancouver, they don't even make it above the canopy of the commercial unit, but they will eventually get up there. So there is some science, and it's not, you know, you can't say because it was, the building was 9 stories, all hell broke loose. But you can say it's better when it's lower. The other part of that low-rise, mid-rise thing is an interesting one because I'm a building code guy as well. High high-rise buildings in the building code are anything over 18 meters from grade to the top floor, which has traditionally been 7 stories of residential. And then above that, you've got to do all sorts of fancy things. But there's this thing that mid-rise is, or high-rise is above 8 stories. And yet when the Jericho plan first came out, and they were describing their typologies of building, low-rise was up to 8 stories. Mid-rise was up to 12 stories. And high-rise was above that. And I kind of put my hand up and said, when did you change the definitions? These are new definitions. And if you say you're building a mid-rise community and everything's over 12 stories, because you define mid-rise as 12 stories, then who can you?
Brian, I have recently watched a webinar done by Sasha Bizard on the Urban Development Institute, which was very alarming to me, but I don't really hear very much about it in other places. And I wondered if you could give the audience some information about that, about their role and their influence in the development in Vancouver and BC.
The Urban Development Institute. I actually used to be a member of UDI when I was an active building envelope and building code consultant. Got a lot of client contacts there. But starting in about 2013, Bob Rennie and a few of his cohorts, this is well reported, I'm not slurring anybody, they made a plan, and they executed that plan. And the purpose of that plan was to dramatically increase the height and density of construction everywhere. And they've used a variety of tactics to get there. And sadly, they've got there. So the Urban Development Institute is a major lobbying organization. They're very fixed in what they're doing. They're very well funded, and they will continue to do that until some level of government has the guts to say, thank you very much, but we're not doing that.
Brian, did I just add
They have to come up and, who's just a comment after this one? Thanks.
just the Urban Development Institute is also, the city of Vancouver is a member of the Institute. There are a lot of cities that are a member of that institute. And there is a movement to get those cities to get out of a membership of a group that's lobbying them, which is stupid.
Brian, thanks very much for this, and fellow human geographer. Can you hear me? Neil, it's like the community streets, so it's nice to be able to just come here and use it for this purpose. And I did spend a couple good years in Ottawa, and I really missed the fact that the trees don't go over 2.5 stories. You're looking out the window. So it's welcome coming back here. My question, and I did go to the town council meeting with the city council, putting my office ODP, primarily echoing the comments of others about the diminishing value of our democracy in terms of not being able to have a hearing about something that you're concerned about. That being said, I was very surprised to see a unanimous decision to pass that. Not even any dissenting votes from any of the non-aligned municipal councilors. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Maybe this is, they trust the city staff and they endorsed it, but because there was a groundswell of opposition to it. And I guess I walked away from that thinking that maybe we are in the wrong model of municipal democracy, because actually I moved here in 2003 and realized that just getting into the city politics a few years too late, because there was a referendum in 2003 to see if we were going to stick with the at-large model or go back to representation in these neighborhoods and these communities through riding. That's how I grew up, and I knew who I could. My dad's here; he'll remember this. I knew who I could go to as a municipal councillor if I had a concern in the neighborhood or in our area. And that just disappeared from my life here for the last 25 years. I make lots of inquiries, no one gets back to me, and I don't feel represented by an at-large council. So I think that could be, like, it's a valid issue for me, and something I'll bring forward. So any comments on that in relation to the disappearing neighborhoods?
I love it when somebody brings a question, it just saying like, yes, I wanted that one all I want. I think that one of the things you can ask every person running for any office in Vancouver in the coming election is, do you support the creation of a ward system? And if the answer is anything but yes, then I would say don't vote for that person. It'll take a couple of years for the mechanics of creating a ward system to be done. But if the folks who are elected want to do that, it will get done. And I know exactly what you're saying. There's nobody, I mean, city staff have eliminated the directory. So you can send an email to councillors and the mayor, which may or may not ever get acknowledged. But if you have a specific issue in any city department, you get to go to the 311 folks who may eventually get you to someone who will eventually maybe promise that someday they will respond to you. But, the ward system is so fundamental. I mean, the fact that we can't contact an individual about an issue in a neighborhood, to do that is just so fundamental. So as to why the ODP got unanimously approved, if you look at the voting records of COPE, One City, and ABC, of course, and the Greens, it's like 98%, I don't know the exact number, but it's the high 90s, where they have voted exactly the same way as ABC. They go through little conniptions, they turn themselves inside out and upside down as to why they had to do that, or if it's important to do, but that's what they did. And if we want more of the same, we should vote for the same folks. And if we don't, we should vote for different folks.
The previous photo just asked my question.
Oh, perfect. Rewind, thing like.
Not a single council dissension.
You'd have to ask why no councillors dissented on the official development plan, construction plan, whatever. I don't have the answer to that question, but if I was them, I'd be darn embarrassed. At the very least.
Should be shaken.
Very quick questions. One, I've never lived under the ward system, and I'm just wondering if the ward system could possibly lead to more NIMBYism, because everybody's for their own neighborhood. And my other unrelated question is that, do you have any numbers on, like, the number of things that we build in the Vancouver plan? The number of more people, the extra people versus the amount of new park space that will be included, and if it matches, because the city on their website has wonderful numbers about we want so much park space for so many people, and are they living up to that?
So in reverse order, no, the city is not living up to a provision of anything in relation to ongoing development. The slide I had on earlier had 22 little dots on it, and those little dots were what the city proudly says will be future parks. When I say dots, I mean dots. They were, they were the size of a couple of lots, maybe. So we're not getting that. We're not getting new schools. We're not getting improved schools. We're not getting, we have promises to fix up community centers. Well, we've had those promises for like 12 years now, and nothing has happened. But I don't think a ward system is going to produce anything like what is traditionally been called NIMBYism, because if you have 10, 12, let's say 11, and each councillor has 2 neighborhoods that they're responsible for, 11 times 2 is 22. So let's just say that for this discussion, take a majority of all the councillors all agreeing on some egregious policy for their wards to have it become a citywide thing. I think what you're more likely to do is have the council take positions on citywide items and then just allow the individual councilors for their ward or wards to bring forward their issues occasionally to council, more often directly to staff. We have the roads falling apart on X street. Don't go to council, go to the engineering department. And with the engineering department knowing that if they don't deal with it, it is going to come up to council, then I think you get more action. There's no relationship between NIMBYism and a ward system that I'm aware of or I've ever seen. But I appreciate the question.
Thank you. This may be too complicated or requiring too complicated an answer, but how would you deal with the issue of amenities and infrastructure? Who should pay for what and what proportion?
I think the feds to pay for it all. Well, the issue, so there's two kinds of infrastructure costs. You ask complicated questions, I answer simple answers. We got infrastructure that exists now and is falling apart. There's a lot of that. And we've got the infrastructure that we need to accommodate new development. So I think that fixing up, and it's not that difficult, I don't think, to say which is in which basket. So I think that the infrastructure that is existing and is problematic needs to be fixed by the city tax dollars or by borrowing and using what you used to do, issuing a bond, borrowing a bunch of money and using that to do it with the credit rating. We used to have one of those, backing that up. But in terms of new development, I think that development should pay for development. And I know that YIMBYs, folks who want to build everything everywhere all at once and all high, will say that it's not fair for new development to pay for its new infrastructure because it puts an unfair tax burden on the on new residents of those areas. And that's sort of partly true, but one of the issues we have is that so much of our infrastructure is being bad upgraded. I can go straight on a Sunday afternoon or a holiday, that's even better, and find all sorts of city crews out there working at double time, overtime. That's got to be a little more expensive than doing it on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. So I think there's a whole huge management issue associated with that needs to be dealt with. But it's not that difficult to separate the upgrading of what we already have and the upgrading of what we want to do.
This will be the last question of the evening, but feel free to chat afterwards.
I appreciate the exercise of the two slides. Brian, thank you very much for your presentation. You really encapsulated very quickly what we've lost and how we got to where we are right now. I work in local government in the community planning field, not in Vancouver, but going back to the example of 2013 and UDI, the result of this has been that municipalities have been mandated by the province to eliminate consideration of context and scale in development, eliminate real public input, eliminate the effectiveness of zoning as a land use tool, reduce costs to developers, and diminish our critical review of development proposals. And this push continues, and it's really founded on rhetoric which I saw starting around 2008, 2010, which demonized established neighborhoods and the people that lived in them as gatekeepers, preventing people from accessing housing and affordable housing at that. Developers are upset about dropping rents, thousands of unsold condos, and projects that no longer pencil out. So I was a bit alarmed as I sat down to read an article in the Goodman Report, which is a real estate blog, how excited agents are that investors are swooping in and buying up large blocks of unsold condos at a fire sale to rent them out and then flip them when the market improves. My question is, can you maybe shed a little bit more light on that rhetoric and how we might turn the ship around for the public?
Wow. Okay, I'm glad I'm in a house of worship. I can just praying here. It's interesting that so far 16 municipalities that I'm aware of to court to have a judicial review of the bills 44, 46, and 47, which have imposed this regime on us all. So they're not happy. Vancouver appears to be happy. I wonder why that is. But anyway, I think the only way to turn it around is going to be a little bit of just saying no. I mean, we have a very well-paid legal department in the city of Vancouver. I don't know what they do. I'm sure they do some good work. I don't know exactly what it is, but maybe they ought to be spending their time creating and then arguing the case along with the other 16 municipalities that the province has gone way beyond its mandate in doing this. Because what they're doing is the reason why so many municipalities are against it is they're saying to municipality, you have to build X hundred homes. You're supposed to be completed by 2030 or whatever the date is, and there'll be more coming. And when the municipality says, we don't have the infrastructure, you're saying it can be built anywhere, and we got to approve it up to a certain total. But the guy who's coming in the door, he wants to build it way over there, and there's no services from there. So the municipality is going to have to provide those services for that development way over there. And the province's response has been to raise the borrowing threshold for municipalities. So let's go further into debt in order that guy way off there in the corner can build his development. And if that's NIMBYism, then call it NIMBY. I just think it's simple economics, it's straightforward, and that's what we got to be doing if we want to save our city.
I think that's a great way to end off our speaker series tonight. Please give me one more round of applause for Brian. And thank you to yourselves for coming out tonight. And like I said, we'll still be kind of mingling around if you had any burning questions that we weren't able to get to you, but just know that we are limited with our booking time. I just want to put on your radar for the next Local Focus session. We will have our next one, April 22nd, in Grandview Woodlands at Grandview Church with Elizabeth Murphy, a private sector project manager, formerly with the City of Vancouver's Housing and Properties Department, and also with BC Housing and BC Buildings Corp. We welcome any donations or community collaborations, and please visit our website and Eventbrite to stay up to date. Get home safe and have a great night. Thank you.
I have a blog called City Conversations. It's free. It also gets republished on City Hall Watch, but I always like people to read. So if you're interested, have a look. There's 200 posts. They go back a long. I remember I read a new post on it. I talked to it 3 years ago. So I take it out and I polish it off, and it looks good. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So just